It was supposed to be a peaceful Saturday afternoon. Mia Carter had taken her 6-year-old daughter Ava to the local playground, just a couple blocks from their house in suburban Virginia. The spring sun was warm, and the air buzzed with the laughter of kids chasing each other across the soft mulch. Mia sat on a nearby bench, scrolling through her phone while keeping one eye on Ava, who was dangling joyfully from the monkey bars. A few other families were scattered around, and everything felt calm, until the sound of tires screeching against pavement shattered the mood. A black and white patrol car pulled up fast near the curb. A white male officer in his early 40s stepped out. He had a squared jaw, sunglasses still on, and walked with a tense, confrontational energy. His name tag read R. Hensley. Without any introduction or visible reason, he marched straight toward Mia. "You need to stand up. Now," he barked. Startled, Mia slowly stood. "Is something wrong, officer?" "You match the description of a woman seen shoplifting at the pharmacy across town." Mia blinked in disbelief. "I've been here for the past hour with my daughter." "You can ask anyone," I said. "Turn around." Before she could process what was happening, Hensley had grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back, yanking her forward. Ava screamed. "Mommy!" The other parents gasped. Someone pulled out their phone. A father yelled out, "Hey man, that's not right. She didn't do anything." But the officer wasn't listening. He shoved Mia face-first onto the grass and snapped handcuffs on her wrists with brute force. Tears streamed down Mia's cheeks, not just from pain but from the shock, the confusion, the humiliation. Her daughter was crying uncontrollably. Hensley radioed something back to dispatch, standing over Mia like he'd just apprehended a violent criminal. He had no idea who he had just touched. Mia lay stunned on the ground, her cheek pressed into the grass, cuffs tight on her wrists. Her heart raced with panic and disbelief. Around her, murmurs of outrage grew louder. One woman was filming, narrating in shock, "This lady's just a mom at the park. Her kid is crying and he's got her in cuffs, for what?" Officer Hensley didn't respond. He kept one hand on his holster and another on the radio, still calling for backup, as if Mia posed any threat at all. Then came the voice that changed everything. "Officer," Mia said through clenched teeth, trying to steady her breathing. "In my back pocket. There's a card. Take it out." Hensley scoffed. "Nice try. Take it out," she repeated. "Now." He rolled his eyes and yanked the card from her back pocket, flipping it over in his gloved hand. It was a matte black ID, federal issued. The words U.S. Department of Justice, United States Marshal Service were printed at the top. Underneath, Deputy Director Julian Carter, her husband. Hensley's expression shifted. His grip loosened slightly. "You're married to a marshal." Mia's voice was low and steady. "Not just a marshal. The deputy director. And you just assaulted his wife in front of his daughter." For the first time, Hensley's confidence cracked. He looked around and noticed the phones recording, the witnesses watching closely, the growing tension in the air. Then her phone, still lying in the grass nearby, began to ring. It lit up with the name, Julian Carter, work cell. "Answer it," Mia said. Hensley hesitated. Then, as if on autopilot, he picked up the phone and held it to his ear. "This is Officer Hensley of Fairfax County," he didn't finish his sentence. Whatever was said on the other end drained the color from his face. "Yes, sir," he muttered. "Yes. She's okay. I'll release her right now." His hand trembled as he bent down to unlock the cuffs. Mia rubbed her sore wrists as the handcuffs clicked open. She didn't move right away. Ava ran into her arms, crying so hard she could barely breathe. Mia held her close, whispering gently, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." Officer Hensley stood stiff, his jaw clenched, avoiding eye contact. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words never came. Because that's when the black SUV pulled up to the curb. It wasn't marked, but the urgency in its arrival made everyone pause. Two plainclothes agents stepped out first, both tall, suited, and visibly armed beneath their jackets. They scanned the area with practiced precision. Then came Julian Carter. He stepped out of the SUV with the presence of a man used to commanding entire operations. Tall, clean-shaven, in a navy suit with a U.S. Marshal's lapel pin on his chest. His expression was ice-cold. "Julian," Mia said softly. He walked straight to her and Ava, kneeling beside them. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low but deadly serious. "I'm fine," Mia whispered. "She's just shaken up." Julian gently pressed his forehead against Ava's and whispered something only she could hear. The little girl gave a teary nod, still clinging to her mother. Then Julian stood. The agents flanked him as he stepped toward Officer Hensley. The entire park had gone quiet. Even the children had stopped playing. "You tackled and handcuffed a woman in front of her child. With no investigation. No probable cause. No witness statements. No camera check." Hensley tried to speak. She matched a report. The dispatcher said, "You don't speak," Julian snapped, voice cutting through the air like steel. "You listen. You treated my wife like a suspect before treating her like a human being. You humiliated her in front of our daughter. You crossed a line that you don't come back from." Hensley looked away, sweat forming on his forehead. Julian turned to his agents. "Secure his badge. His weapon. He's done here." One agent moved in without hesitation, unhooking Hensley's belt gear with swift, practiced movements. Mia watched it all silently, still holding Ava. The park was still, witnesses frozen in place, unsure if they were watching a movie or real justice unfolding before them. Hensley stood frozen, lips slightly parted as the agent unclipped his radio and firearm. He started, but Julian didn't even look at him. "You had one job," Julian said, calmly but with razor precision. "Protect and serve. Instead, you profiled, assaulted, and traumatized a mother in front of her child. There will be accountability." The agent handed Hensley's gear to another official arriving on scene. Hensley was now just a man in a uniform, stripped of authority, exposed before a silent crowd that had seen too much. Julian turned back to his wife and daughter. "I want them checked at the hospital," he said to the second agent. "Make sure Ava's okay. And have a trauma specialist meet them there." Mia gave him a slight nod. "We'll be fine. But don't let this disappear." "It won't." By now, local officers had arrived in response to Hensley's earlier call for backup. They stepped out of their vehicles, confused, unsure of what they'd just walked into. But one look at Julian and his badge, and they quickly realized this was no ordinary scene. A sergeant approached, hand on his belt, trying to piece things together. "Deputy Director Carter, we didn't know." Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You didn't ask. And now your department is going to be on every screen in the country for the next week." Across the park, the witnesses were still filming. Word was already spreading, clips uploaded, reposted, retweeted. What had started as a quiet afternoon in a neighborhood playground had just exploded into national outrage. As Mia was helped into the SUV with Ava, Julian gave one final look at the scene. Not angry. Not loud. Just, resolute. "You messed with the wrong family," he muttered. Then he got in the car, and they drove off. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. By Sunday morning, the footage had gone viral. The video showed everything: Officer Hensley's aggressive approach, Mia's calm demeanor, Ava's terrified screams, and then the sudden shift when her husband arrived. The hashtag #PlaygroundJustice was trending across platforms. News anchors scrambled to piece together the timeline. Phrases like gross misconduct, abuse of authority, and wrongful detainment filled headlines. But what truly caught the public's attention was the identity of Mia's husband. Deputy Director Julian Carter, one of the highest-ranking officials in the U.S. Marshals Service. A man respected across agencies for leading high-risk fugitive operations and federal task forces. The public was stunned. Talk shows debated it, commentators speculated, if this could happen to her, the wife of a top law enforcement official, what's happening to people without that kind of protection? At a press conference Monday morning, Julian stood at the podium, flanked by 2 federal agents and an American flag. He didn't deliver a fiery speech. He didn't need theatrics. He delivered truth. My wife, Mia Carter, was tackled and handcuffed in front of our 6-year-old daughter while spending the afternoon at a local park. There was no crime. No investigation. No basic respect. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled notes. The room was tense. This isn't just about my family, he continued. This is about a culture of assumptions. About training, accountability, and leadership. If an officer can jump to conclusions and assault a peaceful mother in daylight, in public, then something is broken. He paused, locking eyes with the cameras. And I intend to fix it. Inside the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department, the mood had shifted from confusion to full-blown crisis mode. By Monday afternoon, the police chief held a closed-door emergency meeting. Officer Hensley was placed on immediate administrative leave, pending an internal investigation, but the calls for his termination were growing louder by the hour. Local leaders issued carefully worded statements. Words like deeply concerned, re-evaluating procedures, and unacceptable behavior were sprinkled across official press releases. But none of it was enough. The governor had already called Julian Carter directly. Julian, the governor said over the secure line, this is a disaster. We're opening a statewide review into how these departments are training officers. I want your input on the reforms. Julian didn't reply immediately. He stood near his home office window, arms crossed, watching Ava play in the backyard. She was quieter than usual. Her stuffed lion, the one she had at the park, never left her side now. Finally, Julian spoke. It's not just about training. It's about who you trust with power. You can't teach instinct out of someone who sees threat instead of people. I hear you, the governor said. We'll make changes. And Hensley? Julian's tone dropped. He'll never wear a badge again. Meanwhile, Mia stayed away from the media storm. She didn't need interviews or attention. Her only focus was Ava, reassuring her that playgrounds were still safe places, that one man's actions didn't define the world. But everywhere she went, grocery store, pharmacy, even driving, strangers stopped her. Thank you for standing up. I saw the video. I cried. My daughter said you're her hero. And each time, Mia gave the same soft response, I just want my daughter to feel safe again. By the end of the week, the pressure was unrelenting. Community organizations staged peaceful protests outside the Fairfax County Sheriff's Department. Parents held signs that read, she could have been any of us, and, protect mothers, not pride. Julian remained behind the scenes, but his influence moved mountains. On Friday morning, a formal announcement was made, Officer Raymond Hensley had officially resigned from the force. But that wasn't the end of it. Julian had quietly authorized an internal review request to the Department of Justice, targeting use-of-force incidents that had previously gone overlooked in Fairfax County. The request came with a 43-page document, compiled with the help of federal analysts, that highlighted patterns of preemptive aggression, poor accountability measures, and questionable stops involving families, women, and teens. When the news of the federal probe broke, the sheriff himself went on live TV, flanked by attorneys. We take these findings seriously, he said. The department will cooperate fully with federal oversight. The public saw it for what it was, damage control. But for Julian, this was justice in motion, not revenge. Back at home, Mia finally allowed herself to breathe again. She sat with Ava one evening as her daughter colored in a sketchbook. For the first time in days, Ava smiled without hesitation. "Mommy," she said, not looking up, "is that mean officer ever coming back?" Mia paused, then smiled gently. "No, sweetie. He won't ever hurt anyone again." Ava nodded and went back to her drawing, sketching a picture of her mom holding her hand, with a lion beside them. Mia fought back tears. Later that night, Julian walked into the living room and kissed his wife's forehead. "She's going to be okay," he said quietly. "I know," Mia replied. "But this isn't over. Not for the others." Julian looked at her and nodded. "No," he agreed. "It's just getting started." 2 weeks later, Deputy Director Julian Carter stood before a packed congressional subcommittee in Washington, D.C. C-SPAN cameras rolled as he delivered his testimony, not just as a federal law enforcement leader, but as a husband and father. He spoke plainly, without theatrics. Officers don't fail because they lack training manuals. They fail because their leadership tolerates fear-based judgment, unchecked power, and zero accountability. My wife was handcuffed on the grass in front of our daughter, and no one stopped it. That's not a training gap. That's a leadership gap. The room was silent. No scrolling. No whispering. Even the most hardened senators leaned in. Julian ended with a proposal, a new federal initiative requiring emotional response assessments and accountability tracking for field officers in community-facing roles, especially those working near schools, playgrounds, and family zones. It would be named, the Ava Carter Protocol. By the time he left the chamber, multiple lawmakers had already voiced bipartisan support. Back home in Virginia, Mia quietly launched something of her own, a small nonprofit called Grace in Action, focused on legal aid for mothers and children wrongfully detained or harassed during everyday life. It started with just a few volunteers, but within days, lawyers, therapists, and community leaders signed on to help. Mia didn't need a spotlight. Her name had already become a symbol of resilience in parenting groups, churches, and community centers across the country. And Ava? She went back to the same playground. Not with fear, but with purpose. That Saturday, she brought along extra coloring books and sat near the sandbox, sharing them with other kids. When asked why, she said, "Because some kids don't get to smile enough. My mom told me that if something scary happens, you help fix it." The story that once started with a wrongful takedown became something more, an awakening. Not just for Fairfax. Not just for law enforcement. But for a nation reminded that real strength isn't found in badges or titles. It's in the calm voice of a mother. The steady hand of a father. And the bravery of a child who keeps playing anyway. Months passed. The story of Mia and Julian Carter didn't fade, it grew. What began as a viral video turned into national dialogue, policy reform, and, unexpectedly, a movement. Across the country, other families began stepping forward with eerily similar stories: quiet mothers at grocery stores, caregivers in parks, young fathers at school pickup, all of them treated like suspects for simply existing in the wrong moment, in the wrong eyes. But now, they weren't alone. Local councils began adopting parts of the Ava Carter Protocol, even before Congress passed it into law. Municipal departments piloted bodycam AI that flagged excessive force in real time. Civilian oversight boards were empowered with federal grants to investigate misconduct independently. Julian was invited to speak at training academies, not as a critic, but as a commander who believed in reform from the inside out. His message was clear: accountability isn't anti-police. It's pro-trust. But the most powerful voice came from Mia. At a women's leadership event in Atlanta, she stood before a sea of professionals and mothers. Her speech was simple, but unforgettable. "I wasn't brave because I wanted to be," she said. "I was brave because my daughter was watching. And I wasn't going to let the worst moment of her life go unanswered." The room stood in a full ovation. Ava, now 7, came home one day with a crayon drawing she gave her father. It showed a courtroom, a playground, and a badge with a heart in the middle. Julian picked her up, held her close, and asked, "What's this for?" She smiled. "It's for people who forgot what being a good guy looks like." He hugged her tight. "Then we'll remind them." And in a quiet home in Virginia, no cameras, no headlines, Mia tucked her daughter into bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered the words that had become their truth. "You're safe now. Because we didn't let silence win." A year later, everything had changed, and yet, for the Carters, life had settled into something close to normal again. Mia walked Ava to school every morning. No security detail. No fear. Just the sound of a child's footsteps beside her and the rustle of leaves overhead. Ava had grown taller, more confident. She still clutched her stuffed lion in her backpack, a quiet symbol of the day that tested her innocence, and forged her courage. Across the street from their house, a new plaque had been installed at the local park. It read, "In honor of Ava Carter, whose strength reminded us what it means to protect what matters." Dedicated by the Fairfax community and families for justice. Mia stared at it one afternoon, quietly emotional. Not for the recognition, but for the progress. What had once been the scene of a breakdown had become the root of change. At the federal level, the Ava Carter Protocol passed with overwhelming support. It became the gold standard for departments across the U.S., ensuring officers would be held accountable for family area incidents and that empathy training was part of every badge earned. Julian had been offered a promotion, director of the entire U.S. Marshal Service. He politely declined. He didn't want a higher office. He wanted to be home more. To coach Ava's soccer team. To rebuild what had been bruised, not only in his daughter, but in the system he still believed could be better. On the anniversary of the park incident, the family returned, just the three of them. No speeches. No press. Ava ran to the monkey bars again, laughing as her parents sat side by side on the same old bench. The same place where it all began. Julian reached for Mia's hand. "You changed everything, you know," he said softly. She smiled, eyes still on Ava. "No. We did." They sat in silence for a long while, watching their daughter play in peace, on a playground no longer marked by fear, but by hope. And in that quiet moment, they knew, justice wasn't a courtroom moment. It wasn't a headline or a law passed. It was this, a little girl, free to smile again. And a nation that had finally started listening.